Connor Revel. I had a question regarding how children are raised in Scientology. I was raised in the Mormon faith and distinctly remember a strong emphasis being placed on having ample child-friendly materials. Though there was still plenty of studying plain scripture, much of the doctrine stories church history were delivered to kids through things like cartoons and activity pages. Many of these were contained in their own magazine just for young children called The Friend, whose soft edges and simple language contrasted starkly with the boring, repetitive slag that was The Ensign. Things like connect the dots to form the golden plates and color in the prophets from the Book of Mormon were common sights. I know this might seem like a silly question, but is there any sort of comparable equivalent in Scientology? Something like connect the dots to form the E-meter, or color in this image of L. Ron Hubbard. I would think that their approach to that would be at least partially indicative of how much effort they put towards indoctrinating kids in the church. From the testimonials I've heard, most didn't join or weren't active until they were at least teenagers. Is there less of a focus on kids since there's considerably less money to be fleeced out of them? Does the focus just fall squarely on the parents instead, trusting them to teach their kids instead of taking a more direct approach? Whatever the reality of it is, I'd like to hear your take on it. Okay, Connor, sorry if I butchered your last name there, but as far as this is a good question about indoctrination of kids in Scientology, because there are kid-centric courses that are offered for young children. There is a children's course on grammar called Grammar and Communication. There's a children's study course. There's the Basic Study Manual, which is sort of a illustrated compilation book, a small short book of all the study tech, right, compiled down and made simple and easy to understand. There are other children's study courses. There's a how to use a dictionary picture book. There's I think I mentioned the grammar book. Learning how to learn. That's another one of the basic books for kids. There's also a children's communications course. So those are the kid-centric things. I don't think there's a whole lot else. They're not coloring books, although they have illustrations in them. They're not meant to be colored in. The kids are actually doing Scientology. They're just doing it at a kind of a dumbed-down, simplified version, but they're still doing for example, on the children's communications course, they still do TRs, the training routines, where you sit in a chair and look at one another and practice talking to one another, acknowledging one another. So those drills are created for kids. And of course, all the study material is about learning things and how to learn stuff. So there's about 4 or 5 courses that kids could do based on that. And once they're done with those things, the thing is that they don't talk down to kids, they talk up to kids. In other words, they treat kids like adults in little bodies. And while that is horrifying and has disgusting, awful consequences when it comes to justifying sexual abuse and throwing kids in with the adults like was done back in the early 1900s with child labor, I mean, just throwing kids into the mines and letting them have at it. That whole thing is really, really bad, right? But when it comes to the study part of it, the children are given these basic courses on study and then expected to use that to learn at the same level as the adults. They start doing the adult courses, and they usually will start with the simpler ones, like the basic introductory services that people do when they come in off the street and are trying to be introduced to Dianetics and Scientology. So they have this full array of courses called the life improvement courses, and they're not easy courses to do. I mean, no 6-year-old is ever going to do them. But I have seen 10, 11, and 12-year-olds do them. And they'll sit there and they'll study the material and they'll have dictionaries and they'll be made to look up all the words they don't understand and go through the whole same process and get some life skills as a result of that. Because I don't, most of those life improvement courses I don't have a huge problem with. Most of them are pretty common sense, good stuff to know, or how to organize, how to, get along with others and stuff like that. So that's usually the lineup for children in Scientology. So yeah, not coloring books, but simple enough stuff that they can get started. And yes, parents are expected to raise their children with Scientology principles, just like I did when I grew up, and what my parents did with me, right? There's a lot of language and lingo of Scientology that you learn as a kid. Maybe, again, sort of made simpler for children. Instead of saying a reactive mind, they call it a bank and say you're being, you know, don't be banky right now, you know, if you're acting up or having a tantrum or something, right? You know, that kind of thing, right? Yeah, and that's kind of how it's catered, how Scientology is catered to children. And I've seen some adults go really overboard with this stuff, where they take the heavy-duty Scientology ethics materials and they indoctrinate their kids on it. And you can see details of that laid out in my interview with the DeWalls, with Larissa Smith and Tim and Sylvia DeWall, where we talk in detail about how they raised Larissa with Scientology principles and ethics and stuff like that. So you can check that out. I'll put a link below to that video.